a 12-year-old boy who was blind entered a masterclass filled with young geniuses. He was ridiculed by a renowned pianist, but then performed something so moving that the entire room held its breath in awe. Have you ever encountered a child who does not need sight to grasp the world around them? That was Tyler Brooks, only 12 years old and blind from birth. Yet he noticed details that many with perfect eyesight missed. He could sense when someone was not being truthful by how their breathing changed. He remembered the unique sound of different shoes on concrete. And when it came to music, Tyler did not just listen. He deeply experienced it. Tyler lived with his Aunt Joanne in a small one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Birmingham, Alabama. Joanne worked night shifts cleaning surgical rooms in a hospital and took any extra jobs she could find. Life was harsh, and she did not sugarcoat it, but she loved Tyler as if he were her own child. His mother, Joanne's younger sister, died during childbirth, and no father was ever present. So it was just the two of them, struggling every month to get by. Their kitchen tiles were peeling at the edges, the couch springs poked through the fabric, and the heater never functioned properly during winter. Yet in the corner by the window stood a small Yamaha keyboard resting on a fold-out table. It had keys missing and a wire held together with tape. But to Tyler, it was his entire world. He would wake up before school, put on his headphones, and practice without any lessons or sheet music, just raw instinct. Some days he played old church hymns. At other moments, it was jazz melodies he picked up from an old radio channel. Most of the time, it was something he created spontaneously. Sounds that ignored any rules, yet made people pause and pay attention. The local community center housed a dusty upright piano. The keys were sticky, and several were chipped. But Tyler Brooks begged to play it whenever Joanne took him there. Sometimes he would lose track of time. Other children would gather nearby, whispering as if witnessing something extraordinary. They could not quite describe it. It was not only that he played skillfully. It was the way he expressed himself through the music. It was a kind of sound that made even grown men blink with disbelief. One afternoon, as he ran his fingers along a slow blues melody, Ms. Carter, the after-school tutor, watched quietly from the hallway. She had always kept a watchful eye on Tyler. She had seen children like him before, those who bore their pain silently. But what impressed her most was not the pain itself. It was how he transformed it through his music. That day she sat down beside him and asked, "Tyler, who taught you to do that?" He shrugged and replied, "No one taught me. I just play what I hear and sometimes what I feel." She then inquired, "And what are you feeling right now?" He tilted his head and smiled, saying, "It's like these notes are trying to say what my mouth cannot." That was the kind of answer that lingers in your mind. Ms. Carter did not say much more. But later that night, she searched for something she had heard about. A world-famous pianist named Alexander Doyle was coming to town to hold a youth masterclass. It was said to be for the most talented students, the kind who had private tutors and special training. Connections and parents who wrote checks with 4 zeros. Children from schools that had dedicated music wings. Spaces larger than the entire community center. Yet the application required no payment at all. So she completed one for Tyler Brooks. Without informing him, no videos were submitted, just a brief audio recording captured on her phone. Tyler playing a song he had composed on a rainy Thursday, believing no one was around to hear it. But what followed was completely unexpected. The letter arrived after 2 weeks. It was enclosed in a glossy envelope with thick paper and gold edging. The kind of envelope rarely seen in mailboxes, showing rusted hinges and worn paint on the door. Ms. Carter knocked on Joanne's door right after work, still dressed in her navy blue scrubs. Tyler sat at the kitchen table, tilting his head toward the radio, humming softly along to something faint and not quite in tune. Joanne eyed the envelope with curiosity. "This is not a bill, which is already unusual," she remarked. Ms. Carter smiled and replied, "It is from the Birmingham Conservatory." Joanne raised one eyebrow, intrigued. "Are you signing up my nephew for something I should be aware of? Just open it." She slid her finger under the seal, read the opening lines, then paused. Her eyes scanned the rest quietly. She looked at Tyler, then back at the letter. They wanted him to perform in front of whom? In front of Alexander Doyle. He was going to lead a master class, a prestigious and elegant event. Only 12 children were selected, and her nephew was one of them. Tyler glanced up, confused. "Who is Alexander Doyle?" Ms. Carter sat beside him and explained he was French, known for wearing tight suits, and appeared very serious. "He is recognized as one of the top classical pianists worldwide. He performs in cities like Vienna, Tokyo, and Paris, filling venues with balconies towering higher than trees. He is well known, let's say. He typically does not visit this area of town." Tyler Brooks leaned closer and asked, "Why would he be interested in me?" She replied cautiously, "He does not realize it is you yet." They selected the audio recording carefully. Nothing else was known to them. A silence followed before Joanne spoke. "So you mean once they see him?" Ms. Carter interrupted softly. "Then we allow the music to express itself." The week that followed was unusual. Tyler hardly mentioned the invitation. He practiced more, but without obsession. He was unsure what to expect, so he did not expect anything. However, Joanne was uneasy. She borrowed a dress shirt from a neighbor, scrubbed his sneakers using a toothbrush, and even cut his hair herself, hands trembling. "You will go in there and make sure they listen," she said one evening. "No matter what they assume they observe." On the day of the event, the three of them rode the city bus. Ms. Carter greeted them at the station, carrying a takeaway bag of biscuits and bottles of water. "Eat something. This place does not believe in snacks." The conservatory was located in downtown Birmingham, close to the business area. Large glass windows and carefully trimmed hedges surrounded it. Inside, pristine marble floors and the kind of building where people's voices quietly lowered as soon as they stepped in. The contrast was striking. The other children were already present, wearing polished shoes and designer blouses. Parents carrying clipboards and leather bags filled the space. Some were warming up on electric keyboards they had brought along. One girl showed off a custom pink metronome shaped like a swan. A tall, anxious boy was stretching his fingers while his mother massaged his shoulders. Tyler Brooks remained silent, but could hear the soft rustling of expensive clothes, the careful tone of conversations, and laughter that never quite reached the throat. He stood still as Kane tapped gently on his shoulder until Ms. Carter whispered that they were right behind him, and he should not worry about anyone else. Then a voice spoke, asking who he was. It was a low European accent belonging to Alexander Doyle, who appeared from a side hallway. His tall silver hair slicked back and dressed in a dark, tailored suit that surely cost more than Tyler's aunt made in a month. His assistant leaned in and murmured something in his ear. Alexander glanced down at Tyler's cane, and then his worn-out sneakers, smirking as he said quietly, "Let's not waste the piano on charity cases, shall we?" Although the words were soft, they carried enough weight to cause a few students to chuckle, quietly while some parents averted their gaze. Ms. Carter took a step forward, but Joanne grabbed her arm, shaking her head to stop her. Tyler remained motionless, his face expressionless, then quietly asked if he could still play. Alexander blinked in surprise at hearing the pianist and waved a hand without even looking, saying it was fine if time allowed. In that moment, something in the room shifted, though no one recognized it yet. The master class began inside a recital hall with curved wooden walls that reflected the sound perfectly, the kind of space where even the quietest murmur carried weight. At the front stood a grand piano, a Steinway gleaming like dark ice. A velvet rope enclosed the instrument. Only students listed were allowed to step inside. Alexander Doyle positioned himself near the bench like a sovereign by his throne. The first performer, a boy named Camden from St. Augustine in Florida, delivered a technically perfect Debussy prelude that was smooth, clean, and exact. Alexander offered a brief nod, gave some cold, precise feedback, and signaled the next student. One after another the children played. Some excelled, others were terrified, and a few were too proud for their abilities. Yet every single one had two functioning eyes, a private teacher, and a family with the means to support them. Tyler Brooks was waiting. No one had informed him of his spot on the list. The assistant kept skipping over his name. Joanne sat in the second row, her hands tightly clasped in her lap, her gaze steely. Ms. Carter had not blinked for minutes. 3 hours slipped by. It was now well past noon. The last planned performer was done, a girl named Leona from Baton Rouge, who had expressed herself fully through a fiery Chopin nocturne. The audience offered polite applause. Alexander glanced at his watch and announced the session's end. Tyler raised his hand. Alexander looked at him, eyebrows raised slightly. "You mentioned if time allowed. Can I still perform?" There was a pause. Not silence, but a holding moment where adults held their breath, wondering if someone would act foolishly or with boldness. Alexander exhaled slowly and motioned, "Very well." The entire room seemed uncertain where to focus their gaze. Parents glanced at one another quietly. A boy seated near the back chuckled silently to himself. Tyler Brooks stood still, lightly tapping cane. Ms. Carter escorted him down the aisle. He counted his footsteps carefully, matching their rhythm. 7 steps toward the stairs, then 3 up, followed by 4 to the bench. His hand glided over the Steinway's wood surface, cool and smooth to the touch. Alexander Doyle said, "Let's see what we have here." Tyler adjusted his seat deliberately. His left shoe tapped twice on the pedal, testing its resistance. Then he placed his hands on the keys. They were different from the ones he had played before, heavier, more sensitive. Still, he did not hesitate. He exhaled deeply and began to play. This was no piece taken from a book or polished for judges. It began quietly, softly, with 3 notes spaced by aching silence. The left hand joined in, pulling sorrow like a shadow trailing behind. The performance was neither flashy nor flawless. It was genuine. His right hand rose, exploring, then struck a sharp chord. An unexpected burst of sound that silenced the room completely. He intertwined blues with classical nuances, twisting the melody as if it pained him. The middle section shifted into minor dissonance, almost as if the music was arguing with itself. Then it swung upward into a hopeful sequence, reminiscent of a sunrise's glow. No knowledge of music was necessary to feel its power. The piece conveyed loss, anger, love, and endurance all at once. When the final note sounded, it did not linger. Instead, silence followed. No applause, only stunned disbelief, even reflected in the expression of Alexander Doyle, a man normally known for controlling every blink. His mouth fell open just a little. Silence hung in the room, and no one said a word. A girl near the front wiped her cheek without even realizing she was crying. Tyler Brooks did not smile. He simply turned his gaze toward the audience. "I call it where I live when it's quiet," he said. Joanne rose to her feet but did not applaud. She only said, "That's my nephew," and that was enough. However, someone had captured everything on video. By the end of the day, the entire internet would be watching too. The clip was uploaded before Tyler had even arrived home. One of the students, a reserved boy named Eli from Tulsa, had taken out his phone during the event. He never intended to record the whole performance, but once Tyler began playing, he forgot to stop. The boy posted the video in a small classical piano group on social media with the caption, "This blind kid just amazed everyone at the Doyle Masterclass. Watch until the end." Within 6 hours, the video had gained over 50,000 views. By midnight, it was nearing 1 million. Meanwhile, Tyler was unaware of all this. He sat on his mattress on the floor, still wearing the clothes from the conservatory. His hands were folded in his lap as his aunt warmed leftovers in the kitchen. Ms. Carter sat at the small table, scrolling through her cracked phone screen as if it had turned into gold. "Kid," she said softly, "you need to listen to this." Tyler tilted his head. She turned the volume up and held the phone close to his ear. It was a recording of him playing, slightly distorted by the microphone but unmistakably his music. A girl's sharp intake of breath echoed softly in the background, followed by a hush, then a barely audible whisper. What was that sound? "People are already spreading the word," he inquired, "not just spreading rumors." Ms. Carter replied, "They're discussing it everywhere. Journalists, music blogs. A composer from Seattle is eager to reach out to you." Her gaze shifted toward Joanne, who had approached carrying a plate. "Someone from the conservatory got in touch, expressing a desire to provide you with lessons at no cost, and with transportation included." Joanne slowly sat down. They had never wanted to leave the piano unused before. But now, Ms. Carter explained, they are desperate for a chance to sit at it. Tyler Brooks remained silent. He rested his back against the wall, aware of the heater's faint clanking nearby, the distant wail of a siren outside, and how the world seemed transformed since that morning. "I didn't perform it for them," he said. "I played it for myself, which is why it felt so different." The following day, Joanne said, news of the event expanded rapidly. Clips surfaced on morning shows nationwide. One headline declared blind Alabama child silences masterclass, with original composition defying every rule. Another claimed Alexander Doyle was left speechless by the young pianist he nearly overlooked. Doyle's name was now circulating, and not in a way he appreciated. Critics pointed to his remarks, as the internet never forgets harshness, even when it's subtle or quiet. A reporter contacted his team for a statement, but they declined, saying he had none at the moment. Yet, something unusual occurred within the conservatory itself. People began discussing Tyler Brooks without lowering their voices. A music instructor replayed the video during a lecture about emotion in musical performance. A nearby jazz musician reached out and offered to guide him. Even the mayor's office sent a message requesting if he would perform at the upcoming city festival. Yet Tyler kept returning to the community center. The same piano, the same worn-out bench, the same damaged keys. He did not want to leave this place behind. One day, while he was playing, a woman entered in the middle of a song. She quietly sat in the back and did not speak until he finished. "You wrote that?" she inquired. "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "What key was it in?" He paused, thinking. "I do not know. I do not think about it that way." She approached with a gentle voice, saying, "That is how I used to compose at your age." It turned out she was Monique Sevilla, a veteran blues pianist from Louisiana, who had played alongside legends in the 1980s. She offered to help him learn to write his music down, not to alter his style, but to support him in preserving and refining his work. "I cannot give you vision," she said, "but I can give your songs structure." The real challenge was not behind him, but awaited at the front of that very room where everything began. By the time the third week had passed, Tyler's name had reached households that did not even know how to pronounce Birmingham. His face, taken from a still shot in the video showing his fingers hovering over the keys, became an emblem. Many called him a prodigy. Some people referred to him as a miracle. He never gave himself a name, though. He continued to walk along cracked sidewalks to the corner shop where he bought canned peaches. He still tied his shoelaces slowly using the double loop method his aunt had shown him when he was 5. At the community center, he kept sitting at the piano and let the keys guide him, not the other way around, but beyond his own world. Things accelerated quickly as the video surpassed 10 million views. Messages poured in. A producer from Los Angeles invited Tyler Brooks to fly out and appear on a talk show. A streaming platform contacted Joanne about creating a short documentary. Even the conservatory that once neglected to mention his name extended a scholarship offer so he could receive private lessons and formal musical training. Joanne hesitated on how to respond to all of these. Each night, she made her way to work through the hospital's back door, silently hoping the vending machine would not swallow her last dollar. Ms. Carter assisted wherever possible, managing emails and tracking each opportunity, but reminded Tyler every day not to let the noise drown out the music. One afternoon, the director of the conservatory himself, Dr. Shiloh Burnett, called. His tone was steady yet courteous as he expressed a wish to clear the air. He invited them back, not as candidates, but as honored guests at an upcoming gala celebrating the city's music program. He emphasized how important it was for Tyler to attend, calling it symbolic. Joanne ended the call and gazed out the window thoughtfully. "They want you now," she said. "Not because they have faith in you, but because they have to." Tyler Brooks sat at the table, his fingers gliding over the wood as if tracing unseen designs. Does it really matter why? There was no simple answer. The gala took place in the same recital hall with its gleaming floors and velvet barriers. Yet this time, Tyler's name was featured prominently on the program, printed boldly at the very top. He wore a modest suit that Ms. Carter had discovered at an upscale thrift shop. Someone had adjusted it just enough to fit over his freshly cleaned sneakers, which still bore the faded streak from his first time wearing them. Guests at the entrance greeted him warmly, their smiles too wide and their speech hurried. They called him remarkable, talented, a national treasure. Still, their hands trembled slightly when they tried to guide him, not because of who he was, but because of who they had not seen him as only weeks before. Alexander Doyle approached halfway through the evening. "We are honored you came, Tyler," he said. "We want to offer you a full academic track. You will be mentored by faculty, compete in statewide contests, and everything will be covered. Tyler tilted his head slightly. Will I still have the freedom to play what comes from my heart? Doyle hesitated, and then assured him, of course, with proper guidance. Tyler nodded thoughtfully. I will consider it. The offer was genuine, as real as the applause that greeted his introduction, and as vivid as the expression on Joanne's face. A mix of pride, apprehension, and a fierce protectiveness that cannot be taught to someone who has fought for every step. Yet Tyler's heart was not inside that glittering room. He remained calm with the children standing behind him at the community piano, patiently awaiting their turn. With melodies he had yet to compose, and among those who did not require cameras to acknowledge him. That evening, on their way home, he asked Joanne, "Do you think they truly mean it, or are they just feeling sorry?" She replied without looking, "Some people genuinely change their hearts. Others only alter their tone." He pondered those words, quietly, yet his past was far from over. The silent one, who had never uttered a single word, was the very person who set everything in motion. It was a brisk Friday morning when the announcement came for the second master class. The venue remained unchanged, the format identical, and surprisingly so did the host, Alexander Doyle. The conservatory portrayed this as tradition, citing the tremendous success of the event from last year. However, behind the scenes, whispers hinted at other motivations. Doyle's team faced intense pressure ever since that video surfaced. Music forums harshly criticized him for calling it a charity case. Some demanded he be removed from upcoming concert programs. Doyle remained quiet. No apologies, no statements, just silence. Until now. The conservatory director reached out again. "Tyler Brooks, we would like you to join us as our featured guest." Joanne's jaw tightened so much she had to leave the room, but Tyler simply asked, "Will he be there?" The director confirmed, "Yes, you will share the same stage." Tyler nodded, slowly, and said, "Then I want to come, Ms." Carter blinked and asked if he was sure. He tilted his head and said, "I believe he needs to hear a few things." 1 week later, the hall appeared almost unchanged. The same rows of cushioned seats remained. The polished floor gleamed as before, but the atmosphere felt different. Now everyone was familiar with Tyler Brooks, and no one dared to underestimate him. He wore nothing formal, no suit, no tie, just jeans, a neat shirt, and those well-worn sneakers. Joanne sat in the second row once more, her face showing the same expression as before, alert and unwavering, observing every detail. Alexander Doyle arrived 10 minutes late without a smile, giving only a brief nod to the director and a quick sweep of the room. His gaze settled on Tyler for a fleeting moment, then moved on. The program was short, featuring a few young pianists, mostly returning students. Their performances were technically precise and rehearsed well, but everyone was awaiting just one moment: Tyler's. The director took the microphone, saying this young man needs no introduction, yet deserves one. He reminded the audience that music does not ask about one's origins, but only who they are. Please welcome Tyler Brooks. There was no applause, just a standing ovation as every person rose. Tyler approached the piano calmly, brushing his hand along its edge to find his place. Without a cane this time, he sat down, adjusted the bench, and paused, not to compose himself, but to listen. The audience leaned forward as he placed his hands gently on the keys. Not as a performer, but as a friend rejoining a familiar conversation. Then he played. It was not a grand or flashy piece, but a simple, slow waltz. Each note lingered like a breath held in suspense. Soon, fleeting hints appeared, snippets of the blues, faint echoes of gospel, whispered sorrow and laughter concealed within major chords. He wove his memories into melodies. Every forgotten name, every shut door, every night spent with only sound as a companion. It was captivating, and it was meant for one person in the audience. When the last note dissolved, Tyler Brooks rose. He did not bow nor wait for applause. Instead, he faced Alexander Doyle and expressed gratitude. A few heads turned, puzzled. If you had not doubted me that day, I might have continued playing unseen, he said calmly. There was no bitterness, only a clear resolve. Alexander studied him, his expression unreadable at first. It seemed he might speak, but he remained silent. Then he nodded, and this gesture lacked smugness. It was humble, quiet, sincere. Tyler left the stage, crossing beyond the velvet barrier and past seats filled with people who now recognized his name. Ms. Carter met him backstage. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "I believe he finally heard me." Yet there was one final thing to say, and Tyler knew exactly how he wanted to deliver it. 3 days after the second masterclass, Tyler sat at the familiar kitchen table where he had grown up, the same corner spot with a worn chip on the edge that he always tapped with his knuckle while thinking. On the table lay a new letter, thick stationery once more. This time it came from the Baltimore School for the Arts, offering a year-long mentorship program, all expenses paid including travel. His aunt gazed at the letter as if it might explode. "They want you to leave Birmingham for 6 months," she said. Tyler was silent for a moment. "Then what would you do without me messing up your grocery list?" Joanne gave a faint smile. "I would probably start writing it in pen again." He rubbed his hands together slowly, feeling the familiar ridges on his fingertips. "If I leave, I will not stop playing. But if I stay, I can continue supporting the other kids at the center." "Baby," she said gently, "they will still be here when you return. But this opportunity may not come again." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he listened to the silence between the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, and the distant voice of a neighbor arguing on the phone. All of it felt familiar and comforting, yet he sensed something pulling at him, something stronger than fear. That evening he sat with Ms. Carter at the community center piano. She brought sheets of music that were his own, the pieces she and Monique helped him transcribe over the past few weeks, pages that now captured his sound in black ink. "They are calling you a symbol now," she said, sliding the pages before him, "for those who have been ignored, for children who believe they must be perfect to be important." "I am not perfect," he replied. "And that is exactly the point," she answered. "You are not a trophy, you are a reminder." The following day, Tyler Brooks recorded a message for the younger children at the center. Ms. Carter captured it on her phone. He sat on the piano bench, hands folded, face turned toward the window's light. "I did not arrive here because I knew everything he said. I got here because I kept playing. Even when nobody paid attention, even when they mocked him, even when they turned him down, he stopped and said, 'Whatever you possess, use it. And if they refuse to open the door, create your own.'" He smiled faintly, and then added, "Do not be afraid to sound unique." They uploaded the video that evening. It never became widely popular, No interviews followed. Yet it lived in the place that truly mattered. In that building, among those children, where encouragement seldom visits. Tyler Brooks moved to Baltimore 2 weeks later. He did not shed a tear at the airport. Joanne did not either. They stood quietly side by side, arms close, sharing a silence only profound love can express. At the gate she hugged him once and said, "You see better than most sighted people I know." He smiled and replied, "I do not need eyes to understand where home is." Half a year passed and he returned taller, somewhat more confident. He performed at the city's yearly festival. He also went back to the conservatory, not to take the stage, but to sit alongside other kids from his neighborhood. As they auditioned, he applauded each one, offered advice, and most importantly, he listened. Years later, Tyler Brooks and Alexander Doyle would compose an entire symphony performed in Washington, D.C. with a live broadcast. However, when asked about the moment that transformed his life, he always referenced that very first master class. "That day I was not just playing music," he would say. "I was revealing how I perceive the world." The truth is, sight does not always reside in your eyes. Sometimes it lives in your hands. Tell your story using your own voice. Speak out even when others try to silence you. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of someone who has been dismissed, overlooked, or questioned, share it. Not to gain views, but because somewhere, another Tyler Brooks is still longing to be heard. If you have not done so yet, subscribe. More stories like this are on their way. Genuine stories, ones that truly matter.